For making a lapped seam, we work on the right side of fabric. Out of the two pieces, in one of the pieces, we fold the seam allowance of 1.5 centimeter inward and iron it. On the second piece, we mark our seam line at 1.5 centimeter and place piece number 1 over piece number 2 exactly over the line so as to have the seam allowances coincide on the wrong side and have the seam here. You must first pin and then sew it. Stitching will be done 1 millimeter away from the fold. This forms a lapped seam. On the wrong side, one seam shows and two seam allowances will be showing here. To do a lapped seam with a bias binding, we need to mark two lines. One line is our stitching line and second line is where we are going to place the bias strip. So the bias strip is going to be placed like this on the second line. You must pin this up, and then this first piece which we had folded the seam allowance is placed on top of the bias. Again, if you pin it, you will be able to do a better job. I'm just going to show you with my needle in place how this is going to look. So the seam is going to be made like this, and eventually the piece turns out to be like this. Can you see how beautiful this is looking? So this is a lapped seam. This one is called a lapped seam with a bias inlay. It's got a bias strip inside it. Okay. To get the bias strip, you have to just cut any fabric or for different color on bias. On bias means 45 degrees to the warp and weft. So if this is the warp and this is the weft, then this 45 degrees is the bias. This is the bias strip. Our fabric was like this, straight grain was like this, and so we have got it at 45 degrees. We have folded it. This strip was cut 3 centimeters wide. We have folded it into 1.5 and 1.5, and this is the fold which we are using on the fabric like this now. Exposing 0.3 to 0.4 of the bias, we get a beautiful lapped seam with a bias binding in its inlay.